giving Brian a quiet moment for the beginning of the thing.
Okay.
Brian? Brian, are you okay?
Wait, Brian?
Brian and I thought we'd watch a movie here.
Brian.
Brian!
Brian.
I mean, Brian is honestly like the greatest human I've ever met.
Okay, Brian, come on out!
Well, I went and I saw Tron Ares, that is. Swimming pools, movie stars, data pools, computer stars. In any case, so this is going to be a hell of a ramble today because I am one of the 10 confirmed Tron fans in the world. There are very few of us. We get together every year in Oslo, Sweden. All 10 of us. Björgen Gurgen, Randy Goofyheimer, Chris Pratt, me. There's we call him Big Red. He's from California. There's a couple guys do not speak English, so I haven't really gotten to know them very well. No. So this is the thing. Tron is not popular. A lot of people will pretend like it is. Disney likes to pretend that it is, even though they don't support it. Although I will say, I think Disney has a lot of like secret Tron fans like within the company, because the company itself horribly mismanages this franchise, but yet it never goes away. It always has something in development. Like, it's being handled terribly, but there are definitely cheerleaders inside Disney who are always pushing for Tron. So it's a really terrible combination. It has proven time and time again to be a losing combination for the franchise, but I've always been a fan. You know, the first Tron, I guess it came out when I was like a baby, a toddler. And then I discovered it when I was very young. And I discovered the first Tron, I think, at a time when my brain didn't know the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. And it really just sort of fueled my imagination, that visual feast that the first movie was and is. I think I was just fascinated by the world, and I think that is a something that the franchise has basically maintained for all these years. Is it's a franchise that is a really interesting world that they don't know how to tell a story in, and they don't know how to. They know how to build a world, they just don't know how to play in that world once they've built it. And we've seen that now with 3 separate movies. But yeah, so as a kid, I loved the original Tron, and just, even as I got older, I recognized that the movie is not a great movie, but I just had a ton of nostalgia for it. And then when Tron Legacy came out, I thought it was a very good movie. I had a lot of problems with it, and I sort of appreciate it despite all of its faults, just like the first movie. And that's basically where I landed with Tron Ares. I think it's a movie that builds a really interesting world and doesn't really know how to play in that world that it built. And we'll get into it, and I will say full spoilers because I can't not talk about the failings of this movie and how they could have used this movie to create stronger connections to the other two movies and in some ways connect the original Tron and Legacy together in a more cohesive way. Because these three movies are sort of very separate stories with connections, but they are not, I wouldn't consider any of them true sequels in terms of they're telling one big story that is unfolding. I think that is a big hit, a big strike for this movie, and it was a big strike for Legacy as well. Although Legacy seemed to be setting up what would be Tron 3. It was laying a foundation, and it seemed like it was preparing us for a Tron 3 that would have created all those connections. And then obviously it took this long to make a sequel, so they were clearly, I don't know if they were just scared to make a more direct sequel to Legacy. Also, everybody's older, and I don't know. I don't know what the politics or the behind the scenes were, but I think you could have. So here's what I'll say. And again, I ramble. Well, you know what? Here's what we'll do. Overall, I enjoy Tron Ares. I liked it. It's a beautiful looking movie. The soundtrack is killer. And I will say something that I thought was kind of cool because, if you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, but the movie does actually, I think, a better job of kind of explaining what exactly the grid is. Because in the original movie doesn't really explain it, and it feels like maybe the grid is just the entirety of basically the internet, the information superhighway. That's the grid. Tron Legacy was really this like little self-contained grid that Flynn built from scratch. Like he built a new grid and brought Tron, the character, from the original grid to his new grid. This movie, watching the trailers, it's like everything's that orangey red. Like, did the grid turn evil? Like, what is this? Well, it's a separate grid. And essentially what this movie shows us is that sort of there are many grids, and you could probably think of a server or, a group of servers, sort of a company's contained server network as their own grid. So the company Encom has their own grid, with all the firewalls up and protections up. And, there's a part in the movie where Dillinger Corp is basically hacking into Encom's servers, and that is visualized by like soldiers, breaking into a physical building. So you can think of a lot of, obviously, programs are sort of personified as people. The servers are again, personified, I don't think is the correct word, but are, visually, metaphorically shown to us as a place. Buildings, files are like something physical that they can, see and touch and feel within the grid. So I liked, again, world building stuff, super cool. I liked the way it showed that these are sort of separate worlds. It's not all one giant connected world. But I was saying with the music, the one thing that I actually thought the movie it obviously didn't say this, but I was interested to see what. Oh, sorry. I just saw something up in the rafters of my basement, and I didn't know what it was. It was a hat. Should have known. But, obviously Tron Legacy had the Daft Punk soundtrack, and that it's an amazing, truly amazing soundtrack, and, does so much to elevate that movie and to flavor that movie. And with Daft Punk breaking up, the Nine Inch Nails coming in, or Trent Reznor and the other guy from Nine Inch Nails coming in to score the movie. The movie, actually, I thought did a really cool justification for that, which is it's almost more like Daft Punk is the soundtrack of, it's like the musical representation of the Flynn's grid in Tron Legacy. And this Nine Inch Nails soundtrack, which is like distinctly very different, really good too, it is sort of, it's connected to the Dillinger grid, the bad guy grid. So it has, a more oppressive, evil, twist to it. But, and again, spoiler alerts. At one point in this movie, Ares visits the old, like 80s Tron grid, which in the logic of the movie doesn't make any sense, because it seems like they're saying this is the grid Flynn designed in Tron Legacy. This is like his private grid that he built, but that's what Tron Legacy was. And the Tron Legacy grid was not at all the like 80s Tron grid. So that part doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I'm okay with it because I got to see the old 80s Tron grid again, which was pretty great. We will get back to that scene because I think that scene exemplifies actually the biggest storytelling failure of Tron Ares, the biggest blown opportunity in Tron Ares. And that's what I would consider, I think every Tron movie I would classify as missed potential. And each one, I think that chasm of missed potential grows wider and wider. And unfortunately, that's Tron Ares. As much as I did enjoy it, and I did think it was a fine film, I just saw these massive blown gaps of potential that I wish they had creatively gone in some different directions, but we'll get there. God, now I don't even remember what I started talking about. I should talk about let's talk about just the movie itself really quick, or as quick as I can, before we start getting into the franchise as a whole, the connections that I wish were there. But so the movie is basically you have evil bad guy Dillinger. He has figured out a way to 3D print things and characters from the grid. He has found a way to like print them in real life, like bring them out of the grid into real life, which again, Olivia Wilde did in Tron Legacy, and it seemed not to be difficult. I know she was, God, I always forget what they called her nope, I don't remember. Not even going to try. But I know she was unique and she was special. She was this like sort of special, like sentient, metaphysical manifestation program, and all, Clue, destroyed all the others in the Purge, and Cora was the last one left, and she was, going to unlock all these, cure disease and, change the world for the better and all that good stuff. But she came out into the real world at the end of Tron Legacy, and it didn't seem like didn't seem difficult. This movie, they figured out a way to bring characters out into the real world, but they have a time limit. It's kind of like Darkman. Remember Darkman? The synthetic skin would only last 99 minutes. Just take the fucking elephant. You remember that? We should talk about that sometime. Yeah. So for some reason, it's not a problem with again, the connections in the franchise leave a lot to be desired. These movies just for convenience sake seem to ignore a lot of rules established or precedent established in previous movies to sort of suit their needs. But in any case, so NCOM are the good guys. Dillinger Corp is the bad guys. They've both figured out how to 3D print things from the grid into the real world, but they have this 29-minute time limit. They're both searching for something called the permanence code, which would finally allow these things to exist in the real world, indefinitely. And it would turn Pinocchio into a real boy, which I'm surprised there weren't more Pinocchio references. A lot of Frankenstein references, which I don't think are as applicable. In any case, so yeah, Ares is played by Jared Leto. He is the master control program for Dylan Corp. And there's a lot of they try to make sort of visual connections with the way Dillinger communicates with Ares that are, again, visually reminiscent of the master control program from the original Tron. That was the big red head, like that big red spinning cylinder with a face on it from the original Tron. And but this is the thing. So in Tron Ares, the big red head, the big red face is actually Dillinger's avatar, where he's out in the real world communicating, and this big red head is his avatar in the grid. And the big red head is communicating to the master control program in the grid. In the original Tron, the big red head was the master control program, and it was never 100% clear, but it always felt like, because the MCP's sort of sidekick, sort of equal was Sark, and Sark was played by David Warner, who also played Dillinger in the original Tron. And that's another thing that I think all of the movies have had this missed opportunity where, in the logic of the original movie, programs look like the person who programmed them. And that created, in the original Tron, sort of this Wizard of Oz quality where Jeff Bridges, Flynn, he knows Alan Bradley, played by Bruce Boxleitner, out in the real world. And Alan Bradley programmed this security program for the NCOM servers called Tron. And so when Flynn ends up on the grid, the program, the character of Tron, looks like Alan Bradley. So you get that, like, oh, it's the farmhand. And then when Dorothy goes to Oz, the same actor plays the Scarecrow. So you sort of like can make those connections. And it's not necessarily even something that adds to the story. Again, much like Wizard of Oz. It doesn't add to the story, but it is a fun detail, and it's just like a layer of storytelling that I think is fun, and it's something that was not even 1% carried over into, well, I can't even say it was carried over into Legacy, because Jeff Bridges makes Clue, but he doesn't really program, like it's not presented as Flynn programs Clue like he did in the original movie, or because I guess Clue is actually Clue 2.0 in Tron Legacy, because there was a Clue in the original Tron, but that Clue was derezzed, so he's gone. But in Tron Legacy, it's more presented as Flynn saying, well, I've got too much to do. Like, I'm in the grid, changing the world, but I also need to be out in the real world. I'm running a company. I'm raising my son. I'm being stretched too thin. I'm going to create basically like a surrogate for myself on the grid that can run that can continue my work here when I have to be out in the real world. So he more or less just sort of made a digital copy of himself when he made Clue. It wasn't as if he programmed Clue. Clue was just sort of a digital duplicate more than anything else. So even that, like, that's the reason he looks like Flynn, not because Flynn wrote a program to, like, an overseer program for the grid, and it looked like Flynn because Flynn programmed it. We get it. Oh my God, what was I talking about? This is bad. This is going to be like an hour-long video. I'm thinking, give me a minute. How's everybody doing today? Why don't you hit that like and subscribe while I flounder? And I'm not cutting any of this out. If you think I'm cutting this out, you got another thing coming. I ramble, I have brain farts, and you're going to sit with it just like I have to. And thank you for doing so. I appreciate you all very much. So program, okay, it doesn't matter. Well, let me just get back to at least explaining this movie before we move on. So they're looking for the permanence code, and it's basically a race to, I guess it's not even a race, because they do find the permanence code, spoiler alert, but it's a race to, I guess, claim ownership over it. Eve Kim, who runs NCOM, discovers the code in Flynn's old grid in some way. She's basically just like compiling old information off of floppy disks, and somehow she finds it. It's fine. So she finds it. Dillinger discovers that she finds it, and then it's sort of this mad race of like, someone's got to get the code, and I guess claim ownership over it first. Dillinger is like Dillinger the Third, grandson of the original Dillinger from the first movie. He's very quickly out of, clearly he's, an unethical businessman, much like his grandfather. But very quickly it turns psychopathic. It turns homicidal. Suddenly he's very, very willing to kill to get this information. And I get you escalate, but it was almost it was almost too evil. And I also think you could have, so let me explain. Because, very quickly Dillinger's like, he brings Eve Kim into the Dillinger Corp grid because she destroyed the little flash drive with the permanence code on it, but because she saw it, it's like buried in her memory and in her DNA. And so they can bring her onto the grid and extract that information out of like her code. but it's going to kill her. And basically Dillinger's like, we've gone too far. Like he barely, he has like a moment where he's like, yes, he thinks about it that much, he has that much of a moral dilemma. And it becomes, Ares, again, for some reason, the movie doesn't really get into it, but Ares is sort of evolving beyond his programming, and he sort of gets a crush on Eve and decides to save her. He decides to disobey his programming and save her. And so the movie becomes it's like a mad dash for the permanence code. It's a mad dash to save Eve. It's a mad dash. There is this kind of cool ticking clock of the 29 minutes where when Ares, Athena is his like second in command. And when Ares goes rogue, Athena is promoted to Master Control Program, and she is, she has no humanity, and she basically goes wild, and great villain. Like she was obviously Ares was never being set up as a villain, but Athena was top notch. I really liked, she has there's a charisma. There's like that evil charisma to that character, where I thought it was played pitch perfect. Great casting in the movie all around. I liked, most everybody in their roles except Jared Leto. And even him, as much as I do not like looking at him or listening to him in anything, he did a good job in this role, and I didn't mind him. Would the movie have been better casting somebody else? 100%. But I can't fault his casting or his performance. So it's basically, then it's like a final showdown, because Athena, at this point, Athena is laser focused on the mission of getting Eve Kim back to the grid and extracting the information by any means necessary. So she's going, she basically goes hog wild and, destroys half a city, kills a lot of people. Like she is just a terror. That's what a zealot looks like, even to the point where she's basically disobeying Dillinger, disobeying her creator, because he sort of gave her too black and white of instructions, and now he can't even stop her. I think there's a lot of things you could have done differently with Dillinger. So this camera only records in half-hour videos. I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to hit record again. The original, Dillinger Sr., played by David Warner, that actor played the voice of the MCP, the big red head. He also physically played Sark, who was the sort of the minion to the MCP. And again, it's because in the logic of the original movie, Dillinger programmed those programs. So they resemble him visually and in voice, or in voice, I should say, I would have loved if they had, whoever they had play Dillinger the Third in Tron Ares should have also played Ares. That would have been awesome. And because you could have had that, well, one, I think there is like, with this character, there is a narcissism. There is a hey, look at me. There is an almost like not an inferiority complex, but like a God complex with this character. And I think to create a program, the Master Control Program, and that it would look like him would be very appealing to that character. And so I do think that was a big missed opportunity. I think that, and I think it would have been interesting. They only had, a couple scenes where where Ares and Dillinger stood in the same room together. So it wouldn't have been any more complicated from a visual effects standpoint to do that. I think that would have been awesome. And I think it would have been, so again, spoiler alert, there comes a point in the movie where Athena, when she becomes the master control program, she murders Dillinger's mother, who's like the former head of the company before she handed it over to her son, and she is trying to basically stop Athena from her mission, and she stands in the way. And Athena's mission is by any means necessary, and so she murders Dillinger's mother. And I think so. Again, I think it would have to be structured a little differently. But how cool would it be if Athena was also programmed by Dillinger, and it looked like Dillinger, so it would be something that looked like her son murdering her. I think would have been like so impactful, and is really like, and for Dillinger to watch it happen, to see something that looks like him, something where it looking like him made him feel like a god before, now it would make him see how responsible he is for the unraveling of everything and the destruction that he's causing. I think it would have been interesting. I think that character was a little too two-dimensionally evil. In the original movie, the character of Dillinger was basically just an unethical business person. He rose up the ranks at Encom by stealing credit for programming some video games that Flynn had designed like on his own time, but Dillinger found them, in the Encom servers or on the Encom servers and stole credit for them. But he was never a murderer. And actually, one of the more interesting things in the original Tron is that the Master Control program eventually, in a similar way where Athena turns on Dillinger and, basically becomes ungovernable, there is something similar with the MCP in the original movie where basically Dillinger is calling the shots, and all of a sudden he realizes he's not in control anymore. And the MCP was this tool he was using, or this weapon that he was using to for his own gains. And he doesn't, I'm trying to remember if he even realizes it. I don't even think he realizes that the MCP was basically betraying him and was basically pulling his strings and sort of had plans of its own. I would like to have, it made that character like a little more human, because he wasn't just a psychopathic murderer. He didn't like send Flynn to the grid in the original movie. The MCP did that on its own. So yeah, I think, again, I think over the years, people have sort of simplified what was happening in the original movie and don't really remember, just because the villain looks like Dillinger, Sark in the original movie looks like Dillinger. People like equate the two. I guess. But I think you could have done a lot more with the Dillinger the Third. Did you hear that? I just farted. I doubt the microphone picked it up. It wasn't like a ripping, it's not like I sat on a goose. I sprayed down here, so all the barking spiders should be taken care of. But in any case, I think you could have done a lot more with that angle, for one. Another big problem I have, so I should say this. When Tron Legacy came out, I think all the best supplemental Tron material, and I'm granted there really wasn't a whole lot outside of that time around Tron Legacy, but there was some supplemental material around Tron Legacy that I think is, one, it elevates that movie and it elevates the story that it's telling, but it also reminds it reminds me, like, it shows me how good this franchise can be. There was a graphic novel that is a direct prequel to Tron Legacy. It's called Tron Betrayal, if I remember right. I'm probably no more than 10 feet away from it, but I don't know where it is down here. It's in one of my books, or one of my bins of comic books and books. But it was a very good graphic novel, and it was all about that early period of time where Flynn was constructing his grid and really discovering. God, of course, I really should have looked up what Korra's not species, but nope, I'm not going to remember it. It's fine. But it was really interesting, and it actually it's one of those things where that graphic novel really made Clue a much more three-dimensional, much more human villain. And the movie hints at, and it's kind of my favorite, it's not kind of, it is my favorite part of Tron Legacy, when Flynn and Clue confront each other at the end, and Flynn is like, or Clue is like, we were supposed to build the perfect system together. And that is a moment that basically the prequel graphic novel informs everything about that moment, because betrayal isn't just talking about Clue's coup to take over the grid. It is also how Clue feels. Everybody feels betrayed, and I think it's very interesting, and not that I'm saying it's like you see Clue's side of it, but it sort of humanizes his experience, and you see sort of how he felt special, and then he felt like that was taken away, and it was just interesting. And you see that it's not, it's never as simple as he's just evil and he just wants the perfect system, and Flynn doesn't, want the perfect system anymore. It's more like Clue would have probably grown and been able to adapt to the sort of the new mission on the grid in Tron Legacy, but because he felt it's more the betrayal and the bitterness that grew inside him. Again, ironically, maybe the same way Ares grows beyond his programming in a way, and become that, and that it's sort of that humanity starts to manifest as he grows. So too did Clue, but the humanity that revealed itself was sort of that dark, that damaged side of humanity, that hurt, traumatized side. Not, heroes and villains are not born, they're made through adversity and everything else, through life. Life will make you a hero or life will make you a villain. And a lot of it is determined by how you choose to respond to the world, I guess, is kind of what I'm saying. And that's kind of a little bit of a, if you want to really just, it's not in the movies, but if you wanted to get high and like talk about these movies in an existential way or a, philosophical way, that's sort of what you get out of it. And that's probably what these movies are really best for, is philosophical discussion. But yeah, there's that. There's so I do want to talk about my biggest grievance with the movie, and this is probably the biggest spoiler. So, but if you're this deep in, let's keep getting deeper. Tron is not in this movie. Tron is a character. If you don't know, Tron is a character played by Bruce Boxleitner. Bruce Boxleitner, again, he's Alan Bradley, who is friends with Flynn. That actor also plays Tron. I should say, I'll get to it. But when I was talking about supplemental materials, I talked about the graphic novel. I also want to talk about Tron Uprising, because that was the Disney Channel or Disney X channel, computer animated Tron TV show that they made. Elijah Wood starred in it. Bruce Boxleitner was in it. Paul Rubens was in it. Lance Hendrickson. I know Cora was in one episode, so Olivia Wilde, I think she did the voice. Great show. The best Tron that has ever, the best this franchise has ever been is Tron Uprising, hands down. If I had to keep one piece of Tron media and have all the rest, thrown in a furnace, gone forever, as much nostalgia as I have for the original Tron movie, as much as I like Legacy, Tron Uprising is what I would keep to stay. Burn the rest. That is the best storytelling that they've ever done, and it was the best use of Tron as a character moving forward in the Legacy era. The movie Tron Legacy really did the character of Tron dirty. At least he was included in Tron Legacy, where he was not included at all in Tron Ares. But when you name a franchise after a character, you just have to accept, we have to make this series about this character. You don't get to, if Nightmare on Elm Street, well, granted, Nightmare on Elm Street was about Freddy, but I'm trying to think of a franchise. Yeah, I don't know. It's like if you called, I guess I can't think of a good example, because most franchises are smart enough to keep your central character. And you can argue Flynn is I guess, the central character of the Tron franchise, but his name's not in the title. It's okay, this is a perfect example. Got it. I figured out exactly how to make my comparison. If Nightmare on Elm Street had been titled the Freddy Fingers, the Freddy Fingers Killer, for Freddy. Okay, let's just say they're called Freddy. There we go. So the first Nightmare on Elm Street comes out. It's just called Freddy. Big hit, right? The next movie comes out. It's called Freddy 2. But it's all about Heather Langenkamp. Freddy's not in this one. Heather Langenkamp, Nancy, has become a paranormal warrior. She goes around and finds these nightmare creatures, because we'll say in the expanded lore of the Freddy movies, Freddy was a nightmare creature, and there are many nightmare creatures. It'd be like that. It'd be like if Freddy wasn't in them anymore, she would talk about it. She's like, well, I fought Freddy Krueger, and that made me aware of the nightmare creatures and blah, blah, blah. And then just Freddy was not in it anymore. It was about a different character, but you called the first movie Freddy, so now you're just going to call every movie Freddy. That's what they've done with Tron. Tron is a character. He was mildly in Tron Legacy, and the movie was setting up sort of a little bit more of a proper Tron return, but then that didn't happen, did it? 15 years later, they just said, let's just not have Tron in it at all. Not even mention him. That's a huge black eye on this movie, in my opinion. Because thinking about it, it wouldn't have been that hard. So here's my thought. This is how I would have designed the end of this movie. You could have the entire movie the same, but that scene where Ares goes to Flynn's old backup grid and he meets this digital version of Flynn, which again doesn't make any sense. Why would he be old? Like, why wouldn't they have? Like, I know Tron Legacy got like just an insane amount of flack for the digital young Jeff Bridges. That was 15 years ago. They can do that stuff a lot better. They don't always execute it correctly, but I feel like this one, they could have done it and executed it flawlessly as like as a middle finger to all the people who still make fun of Tron Legacy and the digital de-aging and the CG young Jeff Bridges head. This would have been their time to redeem it, and they didn't. I think they were scared, so they didn't. But when Ares goes to talk to Flynn, this is how I would have loved to have seen the scene go. He is, Flynn has the permanence code. He gives the permanence code to Ares, and then Ares is like, I still have to defeat Athena, and I can't do it. She's become too powerful. I need help. Will you come with me into the real world? And Flynn would be like, because he's just Jeff Bridges, he's just the dude. He'd be like, I've never been much of a fighter, man. He'd say something like that. But he'd go, but I know someone who fights for the users. And out of the shadows would walk Tron. In my mind, it would basically be an IRL version of the Tron character design from Tron Uprising. I want the white suit. I want a young Bruce Boxleitner head. Like I want young. I want it all CG. I mean, it could be like a real physical suit, but I want Tron to look like Tron. And the climax of the movie would be Ares and OG Tron fighting Athena, and you'd get to have this sort of like epic, it's like the old gunslinger and the new hot shot teaming up. It would have been so cool to see. It would have been a nice one. It would have had the character of Tron in the movie just for one scene, but it would have also like honored that character. It would have not just sort of like what they did with, I don't think Flynn being in this movie in any way is like honoring that character. It felt like that they felt like they just had to do, because they had almost zero connective tissue to Tron Legacy, and they're like, we need something that is some kind of slightly thicker connection. And okay, a Jeff Bridges cameo, a Flynn cameo, that counts. That's as good as it gets for us. It felt lazy. It felt disconnected. It felt like sort of forced sentimentality, forced nostalgia, forced heart. It just felt empty and shallow. Again, it's still nice to see Jeff Bridges as Flynn. It was cool to see the 80s grid, but so much of it felt like cynical, felt shallow, felt like, oh, we got to do this. Bringing Tron into the fight and sort of like, again, it would be a respecting. I do think that character was really done dirty in Tron Legacy, so it would have been a redemption of that character to kind of come back and again, like it didn't Tron Legacy didn't handle the character well at all, but it also sort of set up a return, and this would have been not necessarily a payoff, like a true payoff to that return, but it would have been at least sort of like a spiritual payoff to that return, and what a return it would have been. That would have been so cool. But it didn't happen. So you just got to imagine it. So yeah, I think that would have been awesome. And then at the end, Ares stays in the real world, but Tron would have been, they could have, like Eve could have offered Tron, like they could have brought him into the new NCOM grid, and he could become the new protector of the NCOM grid. Like it would have just been, again, I think it would have been a way to respect and honor that character. It would have been a way to create deeper, more human connective tissue between this movie and the original movie and Tron Legacy. I think, those connections are kind of a web of connections, and I think this would have deepened many connections across all three movies. Unfortunately, they didn't do it. And that's kind of my biggest grievance with this movie, is just not that it's a bad movie, and it's not. I liked this movie a lot. But it as a franchise, it is a horribly constructed franchise. We've now had 3 movies that do tons of world building and almost no playing in the world that they build, at least not using the world to its fullest. One thing I forgot to mention, just talking about Tron Ares, is I do have to say, I actually think visually I like it a lot more than Tron Legacy. I think Legacy was, especially now looking back on it, I was already at the time kind of disappointed that they didn't sort of pull more design elements from the original movie into Tron Legacy. I get that at that time, that 80s neon computer grid vibe was not cool, and it's kind of become cool again. So it's easier now to sort of pull those design elements in. But like looking at Tron Legacy now, the world feels so sterile and, I don't know, boring. Like, it's crazy to say, because at the time I would have never said it. But looking back on it, the set design, the production design is really cool, but it doesn't feel like a lived-in world. And I think you could have gotten away with that more if you had pulled those like sort of 80s Tron grid elements into it, because obviously the 80s Tron grid didn't necessarily feel super lived in either, but it was just a little more, it's not as stark and sterile as Tron Legacy. That was really the vibe of Legacy. This movie, the world of the grid, feels much more alive. There's just so much more visual detail in everything. I really liked the visual design of this movie, and I think it is a lot better than Legacy, and I really like Legacy. So yeah, I just wanted to remember to say that because I have thought of it a few times in the last 40 or 50 minutes, and I keep forgetting to say it. So yeah, as a franchise, I think this is a giant bummer and continues to be a giant bummer. And that is the big bummer of Ares for me, is just that I wanted this movie to pull the franchise together. And instead, I feel like it, in the sort of the three movies, I think they're drifting further apart now. And this movie also had an ending that felt very, very similar to Legacy, where it feels like it's setting something up, but it's very clear they have no idea what it's setting up. And that's a bummer. I really want this. Again, you spend all this time building this world. Now, if they made a Tron sequel, in a Tron Ares sequel in maybe 4 years, well, now you could play in that world. People would still remember the world. But they're not gonna, are they? There's gonna be another Tron in like 2040, and it's gonna be completely disconnected from everything, and no one's gonna care. This movie's already done. Tron Ares, I already saw it had a terrible opening. I'm filming this on Sunday. I went on Saturday. It was the number one movie on Friday, but it like made no money. So this one's going to die a slow death, the same way they all do. And the cycle will repeat because Disney is seemingly like wants Tron to be a franchise, but is terrified to just support it up front. It's like they want the support to be there before. They want like the fan support to be there before they will do anything about it. But it takes so long for them to feel like, okay, fans are getting loud about wanting this, that by the time they do it, nobody really cares anymore. So it's a bummer. Tron as a franchise is a bummer. I don't hold out like really any high hopes. All I would say at this point is read Tron Betrayal. It was especially if you liked the Tron Legacy movie, it's a really good graphic novel. If you haven't watched Tron Uprising, that is something that really deserves a good long talk all on its own, because it was such a good show. The voice acting was so good. It was like, for me, the realization of all the things that the original Tron could be. Again, like all the world building to just get really good stories being told in that world. That's all I've ever wanted, and that's what Tron Uprising was. And what's a bummer is that's the show that made me feel like, oh, they figured out the franchise. Again, it's like it's all this supplemental material. That show is a prequel, also a prequel to Tron Legacy. So it felt like, oh, they're figuring it out. There's all this supplemental material. They're figuring, like, they have got this franchise figured out. And then nothing happened for 15 years. It's like, you had it. Disney, you had it. You had figured out Tron, and you blew it because you're too afraid to support something and let the audience find it. Because that's what they keep doing. They try this thing, it bombs, and then people discover that they like it down the road. Well, it's like, well, Disney, you know this. Disney, you got the money. Just support it. Just say, look, the audience will find it. We're Disney, for God's sake. Like, we can eat it for a while. And they should have made 3 seasons, 4 seasons of Tron Uprising. They should have been pushing it. There was never, at the time, I'm pretty sure, they never did like a physical media release of it at the time. And this was pre Disney streaming. So you couldn't get that show anywhere for quite a while. You can finally watch it on Disney Plus. So, I mean, it's out there. You can access it now. But for a long time, you couldn't. Like, if you weren't paying attention at the time, they it just disappeared, which again is a great example of physical media, but it's also a great example of if they don't put something on physical media, how do you get it? And whatever. I'm just rambling. Now it's fully derailed rambling. It used to be a little railed, but now it is fully derailed. One thing I will say about Tron Ares, I just want to go on the record. Eve Kim, the head of NCOM, I really liked the actress. I liked that character, performance, across the board. Her comic relief little beta boyfriend, like the only way that I knew that was her boyfriend is they said it in the elevator because he was like threatened by Ares, which like who wouldn't be, like if you were someone's boyfriend and like your girlfriend was all of a sudden hanging out with, Tall, Dark, and Digital, like, yeah, you'd be a little threatened. So he's like, it's my boyfriend. Like, if they hadn't had that moment where they said the words, I assumed he was just her like buddy slash, coworker in some way. But that character was grating. That character was on my last nerve immediately. And I could tell, like the second he walked in, he cracked a little joke and I'm like, okay, here we go. And immediately cracked another joke and then immediately cracked another joke. And that's all that character was. It was nonstop, eye-rolling, cringy, stupid comic relief that was just like rapid fire. Like he just wouldn't shut up. So terrible character across the board. Like I have nothing against the actor. I think so. That's not a casting issue. That's a writing issue. That's a storytelling issue. I want to make that clear because there is. I will say, in this landscape where everybody's talking about movies all the time and everything has to be a controversy and boop. Like if I don't like an actor in a movie, I don't like the character. Yeah, well, again, I don't like Jared Leto as a person. He's sort of the flip side. I don't like him as a person, but actually the character and the performance worked well enough. This guy, I'm sure he's a nice guy. Have no problem with the actor, but if you end up like thinking a character is annoying, it's not the actor's fault. It's like that's how it was written. He got hired to be in a movie, like it's a job. If I got a phone call and they said, "Hey Brian, we want you to be in Tron Ares. You're going to be the comic relief character, and every single line of dialogue that comes out of your mouth is going to be eye-rolling, cringe, terrible comic relief," I would say, "Oh, tell me what time I got to be there," because I would want to be in a Tron movie because I would want an acting job. So I don't blame. I just want to make that clear. I'm sure nobody was like, "Oh, Brian hates this guy," but I just want to make that clear because sometimes we talk about this stuff and sometimes it can feel like, the character and the actor get that line blurs for some people, and a lot of actors get a lot of hate that I don't think they deserve, just because you don't like their casting or you don't like this or you don't like that. It's like, George Clooney said it. He's like, I knew I was going to be a bad Batman, but when the studio calls you and says, "Do you want to be Batman?" you say yes. You don't say, "Well, I don't know if I'm right for the part." You say, "Yes, I will be Batman." So I always think of that when people are like, when hate for a character kind of turns into hate for an actor. I always remember that. I always remember the Clunes and the wisdom he dropped about Batman. In any case, I think we're done talking about it, right? Thank you everybody so much for watching. I'm happy to be back. I watched this weekend actually was a big movie weekend. I watched the new Toxic Avenger. I watched Nobody 2. I wanted to review both of those movies because I liked both of them more than I expected to. And I liked the first Nobody. I liked Nobody 2 a lot more. It was really good. And same with Toxic Avenger. I actually, I love old trauma movies. When I saw everything I saw about this movie made me worry. None of it made me excited. But I gotta say, the movie was much more fun than I expected it to be, and a much better movie, a much better actual movie than I expected it to be. So those are your little previews, but those will be upcoming. I do also still need to review that Superman, because I can't stand to fly. I'm not that naive.